hit that shot. Well, hello, golfers, and welcome to Better Golf with Kevin and Jake Haime. It's Canada Day here in Canada, July 1st, and we're coming off what was a really great weekend in golf. 3 awesome winners. I thought maybe Jake, first of all.
Hi, everybody.
Hey.
I'm Jake.
Yeah. Yes, you are. I'm excited. Irish Open this week at La Hinch, which I've played, I think, 9 or 10 times now. I'm starting to get my feet under me as far as that layout. I want to talk a little bit about that.
It's going to be a great tournament to watch, actually.
Yeah, you were there.
Yeah.
How'd you do at La Hinch? I don't remember.
Though that was the round that we played getting off the plane. So jet-lagged and probably not great. I don't remember. We didn't really keep score.
My driver was broken.
Yes, I do.
Oh, my God. What a moment in my life.
Not
I must say, Air Canada came clean. They ended up giving me, enough money to replace the shaft, which was $300 and some, I think. But, I show up at La Hinch. We land. We flew all night. And it's this actually understated first tee, but awesome in its simplicity, like all of Ireland. The pro shop is quite small. Young girl actually sitting behind the counter on a stool, I think, like not a really big thing. But I get out there and we've got the caddies going, and we waited our whole lives to get there. And I asked the caddy for the driver, and he says something like, "Well, mate, you've only got 13 clubs or something," and the head comes off with the head cover.
So I actually remember you said, "I'm sorry, I don't know if you'll care, but I have 15 clubs. I didn't know which club to take out yet." And he goes, "Well, you only have 14.
Yeah, is that what it was?
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll get to more of that. We'll continue on that. We're also going to teach you a little something, because it is called Better Golf, our podcast, through Steve Stricker, who I played college golf with at Illinois, and I know very well. And we'll talk about his game and his psyche a little bit and what makes him so great. And Nate Lashley's story. I think you and I have talked so much about emotional competencies and emotional intelligence and what it takes for a kid who's never been there at all to, start Sunday with a 6-shot lead and keep it.
That's pretty cool.
And then Sung Hyun Park, who...
she takes number 1 in the world with the win, correct?
Yeah, she does, and she's a great combination of swingers. If you're watching this podcast, we've got her at the top of her backswing with a driver, although it looks like a 3 medal there on the left, but good ad for Ping. The Ping logo's splattered everywhere. But that girl can play golf.
Yeah, really play golf.
And what a swing. A little Tiger-esque. So we'll talk about that as well. And maybe if we have time, we'll get to some fallacies too, but it sounds like we have a lot to talk to. All right, back to the Irish Open and the driver.
Yeah.
This is a great teaching moment for people. So the guy was funny, right? Our caddies, I didn't know what to expect. If you go to Ireland or Scotland, try to get the oldest, most curmudgeonly guys you can get, because it makes it more fun. And they were dropping the F-bombs on us, which, of course, in Ireland, it's F-E. It's F-E-C-K, it sounds like, right? Too many juniors listening for me to just drop that. But what are you bloody doing? It was so funny. But they give you a lot of history, too. And anyway, first hole, pull off the head cover, and the head comes with it. Air Canada had broken it.
Yeah, not good.
So I couldn't really believe it. So I hit 3-wood, and it was like kissing your sister a little bit on the front 9. And at the turn, just on a lark, I said, you know what I'm going to do, Jake? I remember talking to you about this. This is pretty boring, hitting a 248-yard or 53-yard or about 250, I guess, 3-wood all day. So I'm going to put the driver head on my 3-wood shaft.
Yeah, and then the 3-wood head on the 5-wood shaft.
Correct. Just to get through the round, and learned afterwards I was getting through the entire week because not a lot of repair shops in Ireland.
Yeah.
Ireland doesn't have a giant superstore that you can go and buy a golf shaft or something. So I did contact Ping and ask them if they could ship one over. And then I thought, we're moving around different hotels every day. And so we just decided, I just was hoping that would work. And it was an incredible week.
It worked great.
So I used a 43-inch golf shaft on a driver, and I might have lost a few yards, but I hit a lot of fairways.
Yeah, I didn't even feel like, I remember playing, you didn't lose much. I mean, it didn't really change the distance with your driver. And, it was, as for me and as a general state, it was almost an epiphanous moment as a golfer, let alone a fitter when we did that, because you always just buy into the driver length as the driver length. And, at the time I was using a tour shaft in my ping, so I was 45 and a quarter instead of 45 and 3 inches, and thought, 45 and 3/4 inches, sorry. And, just figured that, having it short, it doesn't make much of a difference. It feels pretty good. But then when we put your 3-wood shaft in, I had a little moment of, why don't we do that more? So many people would benefit off shorter shafts that...
I've been fitting since 92, so it wasn't all about regular length. I understand at your age at the time, at 22, you weren't fitting yet. But I think even eye-opening for me that a 43-inch shaft, like you always think, well, let's take half an inch off that because it's a little out of control. And we literally, changed our driver matrix with companies after that. We started requesting 44-inch, 44 and a half, shorter clubs, right? And it's one of the little secrets on tour is many of those players use a lot shorter driver than you would think. I think Tigers always use like a 44 or 44 and a half.
Well, I know Ricky Fowler, and at the time Jimmy Walker was playing unbelievable. Jimmy Walker was using a 43-inch driver, same as you were using, right? The 3-wood shaft in the driver head. And, you do have to make
Ricky
sure...
at?
43.
Yeah.
43.
Yeah.
So, they have these really short driver shafts, and just, for everybody kind of wondering why they would be doing that, because you'd potentially be giving up distance. I mean, in theory, ball speed is what creates distance, not clubhead speed. So if you lose maybe a mile an hour or a mile an hour and have a clubhead speed, but you hit the ball more centered more frequently and have just as high
You're a better player.
Potentially higher
I would argue
ball
some
speed,
people could swing. I would argue some people can swing a shorter shaft faster. Like if you think about which could you swing around you faster, a telephone pole that's too heavy and awkward, or something obviously short and light.
No, that's another great point. I would completely agree with that, and I think that many people, when we try something shorter, as short as 44 and a half or 44 inches, they don't lose at any speed, and you wind up hitting the ball better. So for that player, it's a no-brainer. You go shorter.
I hope a lot of people listen to this podcast before the Irish Open and decide to watch it this week, because it is an incredible golf course. Lahinch is an incredible golf course. I think it's around 42 in the world. Jumps around a little bit, but it's a top 50 course in the world. And it's got so much character. I mean, 2 of the holes there, the 4th and the 5th holes, are so stupid that if you built them today, people would say...
They'd call the course gimmicky and say, what are you thinking? Yeah, for sure.
So number 4 is a par 5 with a 50-foot mound right across at the 200-yard mark. Like right across. I'm not talking like, it's a hill on the side of the fairway.
No, yeah.
It is like a giant wall.
It's basically a dune in the middle of the fairway.
And there's a guy up on the hill in a little shed, and that guy comes out with his little flag and tells you to hit over his head all day long. He does that. And it's interesting. It's an old Tom Morris original design. Yeah. But it works because it's a shortish par 5. I think if that mound wasn't there, it'd be a pretty boring... they'll probably play it as a par 4 this week.
I think the course is playing to par 70 for the Irish Open, so I would assume...
Yeah, I hit driver 4 iron there. So I'd say one day I hit driver 4 iron. I can also remember, though, blowing it into the dune on the right and then chipping it too close to the hill and thinking I could get over and knocking it into the dune and taking an X, because the dune is 50 feet straight up.
Sure.
And it's fescue grass. So if you find it, you've got close to nothing.
Yeah,
So if you don't play it well, it can lead to a big score. And then the 5th hole is even more interesting in that it has a wall of dirt, a mountain in front of a par 3. You cannot see the green. And there's a white stone on this dune. And depending on how high up or how much left to right they place the stone, that tells you where to aim and where the flag is.
Yeah, I also, as a general statement, as an architectural feature, I love that. Like number 17 at Cabot Cliffs does that too, right? They have the stone in the rock face that lets you know where to hit it off the tee. It's a blind tee shot. I love that as a concept of this is where you go and you just trust the course architect, and as long as you have the right club, it could work out great.
Goes to show you, without eyes. Your ears affect a lot of things when you play. The sound of a driver. I argue to my death that no one can feel the difference between a hard ball and a softball. You can't feel it, but the sound of impact tells you what it is. Mm-hmm. Sound is very important, but visual. I mean, it's to trust your golf swing enough to someone say, just hit it at that post out there, that rock, and you have to do it. Anyway, it's a beautiful golf course. The 8th hole, one of my favorite par 3s in the world. The third hole and the seventh hole are very difficult, blind tee shot par fours. There's a little stretch on the back nine. What is it now? It's 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 are two back-to-back par fours that you've never played harder holes. So it's going to be a neat week. I'm really looking forward to it.
It'll be very cool.
Love links golf.
It's a unique course. If it plays firm, it'll be really interesting to see how the players handle it, right? I mean, the one complaint you could have about watching some professional golf is that a lot of the courses, at least on TV, look so similar, and the guys just play the course the same week after week after week. And I think it's one reason why the Masters has its own flair to it. The U.S. Open's so special because it's different. I think that if you don't end up watching the PGA Tour event this week, in the week before the British Open, the Irish Open's a pretty cool alternative. I think it'll be fun to watch.
Yeah, well, it's Scottish. Unfortunately, I think it's Spot in the Mark Leishman actually came out this week and said, you've got the Scottish Open next week, and then the British Open. A lot of guys won't go over to Europe and play in both.
Yeah,
even Rory McIlroy. It's raising money for his foundation. He's kind of the sponsor of the event. He told us all at the start of the year he was being selfish with his schedule because he's got his priorities, and this is his rhythm. He doesn't like to play 2 weeks before a major, so he's taking this week off. And they've still got Tommy Fleetwood is there. There's a lot of good players there. But
a lot of great European Tour players.
I hope people take it in and watch it, and I hope that how spectacular it is really comes off on the coverage. Sometimes, like Augusta National, Jake, if you haven't been, I know you've been there, number 10 down the hill. People say, the hills are better than what you think. And the same thing might happen at La Hinch, where
that's true.
Some of those dunes, right? But it's a fun go. I assume they'll be playing 18 as a 4 as well, because that's another driver, long iron hole. So I would think 4 and 18 will be the 2 par 4s.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it could be different on TV than it is in person, but I still think that course is funky enough, and I don't mean that as an insult, but funky enough that it will come off interesting on TV, and it's almost a little appetizer for Portrush, right? Because we get some Irish golf right before, so I think it's going to be super fun to watch. I really do.
Be great. All right, who do you want to tackle first? We're going to teach people how to play based on 3 big winners. You've got Steve Stricker winning by 6 at the U.S. Senior. You've got Nate Lashley winning by 6 in Detroit, and you've got Sung Hyun Park winning and in Arkansas and becoming number 1 in the world again. Which swing or which play do you want to teach people? You pick.
Well, we were just talking about PGA Tour, so why don't we talk Lashley first and then go from there?
Sure. I've been watching the Golf Channel this week, and everyone's already said about the tragedy of his parents. For those of you who don't know, his parents and his girlfriend at the time died in a plane crash coming home from watching him play golf.
Yeah.
He was a good enough player in college to be at a big school, so he's a bit of a thoroughbred, but we've never heard of him because when tragedy hits you, everybody mourns differently, everybody is affected differently, and Nate has really struggled. He even gave up the game, for a few years. Then he came back and he won on, I think, the Latin America Tour, and then he won on the Corn Ferry Tour, which I really don't like.
Yeah, I actually heard.
And then he was the first alternate this week and won on tour. But what an interesting pathway he's taken because of the tragedy of his parents and his girlfriend dying.
I also heard this morning as part of that not only did he take a bit of a break off, but he didn't earn a professional dollar from 2007 to 2014 attempting to play pro. So
it is fascinating to watch someone do it 4 days in a row. It's so impressive. It's one thing if Nate would have been 8th and playing pretty well based on his first alternate status and got into the event and then shot a 60, the round of his life, and won by 1 or something. But to lead from the first hole all the way through 72 holes, I mean, Ray Floyd and Lanny Wadkins and Tiger Woods and Brooke Henderson, I would say, on the female side, certain players can do that. Not that many can.
Well, what's been interesting, too, though, is we've seen a couple players in the last year do it. Right, Max Homa is an example. These younger guys who have come in as these alternate players, or coming off the Web.com tour and barely qualifying for events, have now won several events recently.
Shows you how deep the tour is. Huh?
Exactly, it shows you how deep it is and how many good players there are. And week to week in the PGA Tour, you have no clue what's going to happen. But I think in his case, you're right, leading by that much too and holding on to it.
I would say, Jake, that tragedy in a way. Probably made him pretty resilient and
I would
probably put
imagine.
golf in perspective a little bit, right? We've always talked about the 10 competencies. Resilience is a biggie.
Yeah.
Focus. There's certain ones that I can certainly lean to figure out exactly what Nate used in this, and I think having self-control in that last round, having focus and staying in the present and pacing himself and keeping to his game plan, and then just as a human being resilient are three of the competencies that I would certainly go to. And, I had a similar thing happen in my life. I haven't talked about it too much with very many people, but a good friend of mine was killed with me one night, and I was in a car behind him, and he died on a motorcycle right in front of me. And I'll tell you that, when something like that happens, that 3-footer never feels the same again. Golf never feels the same again. You question a little bit, chasing a little white ball and spending 12 hours a day doing nothing but that, because you realize at a young age how fleeting life is. When the people who love you and support you are torn from you, I can only imagine. I mean, this was a friend of mine. I can only imagine if your parents are taken away from you and your entire support system. So it's been a long and winding road, to quote the Beatles, but super happy for the guy. And I think what we take out of it is that, we coach so many juniors. You've got to keep golf in perspective. I spoke a little bit of faith. We don't even know. I mean, Nate may be an atheist for all we know. We don't know. But I think there's a little bit of faith there in probably believing that your parents are somewhere watching you and giving you some strength in those moments, It's just a game. It's certainly something that he might repeat to himself at certain times. But then walking slowly, keeping the heart rate the same, having a routine, having a pre-shot routine, all of those things help to just maintain the emotions in that pressure cooker. And he did it beautifully. Now, if he starts hitting bad shots and missing fairways, he played well.
Yeah, it's harder to do it in that case, right? If the wheels fall off a little bit on a few shots, it's hard to sometimes be resilient. When you're playing well, it's a little easier to be resilient. But I think it makes total sense. I mean, we talked about that with Gary Woodland as well, winning the U.S. Open, right? How the perspective he probably gained from having the complications with his first childbirth and all of those things give you perspective of how important golf is. And I think that, from a normal player standpoint, that's the thing we can all learn from this too. It's not just tour players get more resilient and can win money because they have had stuff happen to them, but you got to make sure that whatever level of golf you're at, you put it in perspective. We are playing a game, whether it's you putting for the first time to break 100 or 80 or win $1 against your friend in a skins game. I mean,
the other thing you got to do. I've always thought it was silly gambling on golf. You don't know what's happening. Any sport, really. I'm not a big fan of gambling and playing the lotto, and you don't know what's happening off the ice or off the golf course. And
you mean gambling on professional events?
Yeah, gambling on events. So, you don't know that, someone isn't feeling sick that night, or that someone's girlfriend dumped them last week, or whatever it is, right? The off-arena stuff has so much effect. And I think I realized that because I've watched close friends compete. I played NCAA golf, professional golf. So, if you're in the right headspace, magical things can happen. Mm-hmm. And if you never know what elements in your life are going to lead you to a certain spot, and it's amazingly cool to watch. It's the thing I love most about golf. We don't see this happen in too many sports, right? Where somebody out of nowhere. Now, he qualifies for the Masters, the big winter event over in Hawaii, whatever it's called now. He gets a 2-year exemption on tour. He's in the FedEx Cup playoffs. He's into the Open Championship. It changes your life.
It changes his life. And I think, you're right. One thing that's unique about golf is a guy can Monday qualify as an alternate, barely get in the tournament. Like literally, he couldn't have gotten into the tournament less likely. And then he winds up winning the thing, let alone by 6. I mean, it again, as you said, it shows the depth of field, which is incredible about golf right now. And it's really a great situation where unique stories can come up from the ground and happen so quickly too. And like you said,
out of nowhere, never heard of the guy.
Never heard of the guy.
And we follow golf pretty closely. The teaching moment though is you need to find there's a certain time for you. If you play badly in an event, maybe it's just not your time. You keep trying at golf. You stay optimistic. You stay resilient. And then when you're on the golf course, you stay with your game plan. You stay focused. You stay in the moment. You stay confident. And all of those things can help you do magnificent things.
Yeah, try to give yourself some perspective, right? Remember at the end of the day that whether the 3-foot or 8-foot putt for whatever it is about it, at the end of the day is not going to make or break your life unless you're playing on the PGA Tour, and most of us aren't. And in that case, just hit the putt and have fun.
All right, second 6-shot lead or win.
Yeah,
Steve Stricker, my old pal from the
that,
Illini.
by the way?
What's that?
I said, how coincidental is that? Steve is captain of coincidence because last time he won, wasn't it the same time that was it Charles Howell won, and there was some crazy coincidence that they both hadn't won in like the same amount of time or something?
Yeah, I think I remember
this
that.
Is a compelling story because I don't remember the details, but he's had a lot of coincidental wins recently.
Well,
is my
Steve, Steve's another guy where the emotions do it all. You notice Nikki, his wife, on the bag yesterday. Steve, so he comes to Illinois, and I'm already, was I a junior or a sophomore? I don't know. But literally, he came for a recruiting visit, and he had like the bold Beatles hairdo.
I've seen some pictures. They're pretty
He had
great.
the bold Beatles hairdo, and he had the leather jacket on with the medals on it. I mean, he was from Edgerton, Wisconsin, and just looked like he was from small town USA. Not exactly whirly, but boy, could he play. The putting, fascinating. We're going to talk about his putting a little bit. But Steve wasn't, you want to talk emotions again, he wasn't that confident a guy. He had more talent than you needed. He won the Big Ten as a freshman. He won the Western Open by 9 shots, I think, when he was 25. But then his wife, Nikki, who was caddying for him, and her dad, Dennis Tiziani, the longtime coach of Wisconsin, was his coach. When she stopped caddying for him to have a family, he really floundered quite a bit. And there's a guy, I think Mike Hicks was his name. He used to be Payne Stewart's caddy, was caddying for Steve at the time. So he had a good caddy. But Steve was a real insecure, almost too nice a guy. You see that, right? He cries when he wins. And he's a real family, simple guy. And I think he was overwhelmed out there by himself and couldn't quite do it. And I think really his emotions and his lack of aggressiveness, if you think about Tiger Woods, are the reasons he never won a major. Although you would say that from a skill perspective, he never hit the ball quite far enough relative to some of the other guys to win a major. Although he almost won at Medina.
Except guys like Corey Pavin won major, so Steve could have done it.
Yeah,
I
he
think
could
he had
have.
talent to do it.
But I just never thought he had that killer instinct. But a fascinating thing happened to Steve on the way to this point, which is he became Tiger Woods Ryder Cup captain and buddy.
Yeah, I know.
And now he's President's Cup captain and Ryder Cup captain.
He's in the inner circle of American guys now, yeah.
And now he's got more confidence than he needs. And now here comes the talent, right? There's nothing he doesn't have. And once you become Tiger Woods Ryder Cup partner and once you become a President Cup captain, you've got to be filled with confidence and a sense of being and a sense of belonging on the whole tour experience, right? And in the history of golf.
Absolutely. And when you can putt like that
and now look out.
Yeah, when you can putt like that to boot, then all of a sudden you're a dangerous
my favorite
force.
story about Stricker, I'd love to tell it here because my roommate from college for 3 years, Don Edwards, won the Western Junior. Don's a great player. He runs an equity fund out of Chicago now. He's made a lot of money. Still a real good, down-to-earth guy. But he flew Steve to some majors when Steve wasn't playing that well. And Steve would go around on his plane, and they'd travel to the British Open together and different things. Well, Don grew up at Westchester Country Club. And he was the junior club champ there. He was the Western Junior champion. And he said to Steve, the FedEx Cup was just starting. And he said, Steve, you got to play at Westchester. Steve said, I hate Westchester. I don't want to go there. I don't want to play there. He says, look, I'm going to show you how to win. And Don had a plan. So Don wrote him out a page on each hole. And the basic premise behind the plan, we talk about emotions and organization and preparation and everything you need to be a good golfer, was that there are 9 holes at Westchester Country Club that are birdieable. And there are 9 really hard holes. And your strategy should be to hunt the birdies on the 9 holes and play really conservative on the other 9. And Don looked at all the numbers, being a numbers guy, which is what Don was. He said, look at the winning score at Westchester has always been between 13 under and 17 under. 4 birdies a day.
Yeah.
So out of those 9 holes, you've got to make 4 birdies. If you make 4 birdies a day on the easy 9 holes, you'll win the tournament. And put the plan together, and Steve won the tournament. And
how cool is that?
I don't know if you remember that Peter Costas interviewed him afterwards, and Steve was bawling like
I do remember.
like a 13-year-old.
Yeah.
You know, he was bawling. But that was another moment that led to where he is now. And the guys on the Golf Channel said this morning that, you know, they think he's the best player on the senior tour now, on the Champions Tour, and he just won the U.S. Open, the senior U.S. Open, by 6.
Look, I believe that he's the best player on the.
But again,
senior tour.
much like Nate Lashley, not tragedy in his case, but a pathway. What super talented but small town guy. Having his wife with him around, I think, gave him confidence. Floundered a little bit, found his place as an iconic American player and a loyal, long-term, really nice guy, and boom, here he is. So, you know, all the off-course stuff matters a lot, I would say, when it comes to... By the way, he fixed his swing, right? When we played in college, Steve hit a 3-wood because he couldn't hit a driver.
Yeah.
He had a real funky kind of pickup roll-away. I actually sent him a VHS tape of his swing one time, said, Steve, you know, look what you're doing here. He picked the club outside and rolled it open, and he just got the club in a really bad position with a driver.
Yeah, it's not a great move to start
And
with.
you know what inspired him to get better? I don't even know if he'd like me to say this, but his brother-in-law, Mario Tiziani, was playing really well. And I think Steve finally said, you know, Mario's beating me. Like, I got to figure this thing out. And he and Dennis spent one winter working on his golf swing, and they fixed his takeaway and his backswing position. And that's all it took. We all hope to be that lucky that there's one thing that if we can find something to fix it.
Your secret to golf.
You know, Steve got to number 2 in the world. But it was his takeaway, the pickup rollout thing, and setting his right arm, his trailing arm, in the right position at the top of his backswing to hit a driver, to hit the driver properly.
Yeah.
And they worked at it in out of a trailer in Wisconsin in the winter, hitting range balls. It was funny. I interviewed Steve on the radio. He came on Tee It Up with me a bunch of times, but he says, well, yeah, I was working on it, but then we ran out of balls because it was snow. And I'm like, Steve, like, you're with Titleist here. You're a top player in the world. I'm sure they'd send you more golf balls. But Steve was hitting. That's typical Steve.
Yeah.
That's typical Steve Stricker.
That's great.
He's hitting these old range balls, probably
out of the
yellow,
trailer in Wisconsin.
Out of the trailer with Wisconsin with his father-in-law, who's his coach. And I don't even know if Dennis used a ton of video. They were old school. And
you know what,
great story, though. Huh?
That does go to show you that as long as you practice the right stuff, this whole thing of I got to practice on grass and I got to have these super specific conditions to pure golf practice.
Where the biomechanics of, force plates and everything.
Yeah, well, I do think some of that, that does
good.
educate us.
No, listen, I'm not poo-pooing science. Science has now got guys hitting the ball 360
I'm more saying that guys who, we get ones, we're on a driving range as a part of our center, right? And people come and they ask if the grass is open, and it'll have poured rain that night, so the grass isn't open because it wouldn't be good.
And they leave.
And it's like, you hit the ball first, guys. If you're on a mat and you hit the ball first, then it shouldn't matter. And everyone's always thing is, well, if I hit a bad shot, I'll get credit off the mat. And it's like, but you hit a bad shot.
Yeah, a little bit. If you hit behind, I think that's a load of bunk. I really do. I haven't been hitting off grass for 25 years. Our lesson bays here are all AstroTurf power tees. It's a beautiful surface to hit off. You're working on your balance, the shape of your swing, what impact feels like. You're right, Jake. It really doesn't matter.
Speaking of that, just to finish the point, put a nail in that point, because this is a pet peeve of mine, people having this conversation. I remember, you were at that power tee event with Jim Furyk, and Jim said that if you're working in your golf swing, he would only work on mats. Because then the lie's perfect, the conditions are perfect, all you have to worry about is the motion of the golf swing. If you want to then practice course conditions, you go to the course and you practice on grass. But that when you're practicing, perfect lie is more important than anything.
You're working
on
your takeaway, right? You're working on your takeaway. You want a dead flat surface, dry feet, everything to be. You don't want a little lie where a little bit of the ball gets a little bit of muck on it or is tucked away under the grass and you get a flyer. It's better feedback off a scientific type.
It's more pure.
Yeah, what we call a clean room. It'd be a clean room effect, right? Everything's perfect.
And to kind of round it all back to the point with Steve is if you have the right environment, you work on the right thing. I mean, can you imagine how good most golfers would be if they just practiced their takeaway constantly? To the point you make about Steve fixing his takeaway and then all of a sudden being a better player. I mean, so many players in the first half of their backswing or first third of their backswing get themselves in such a poor position that if you just practice that alone, worked with a pro to find out what it feels like to do it properly and then worked on it, could be life-changing.
Love it. We're Canadian. We've got a winter to deal with. You're right. If people worked on setup, the setup conditions, the posture, the balance, the alignment, the grip, the old PGA, Brooks Koepka from the Players' Championship, if they worked on that and then swinging the club away to waist high on the right line, oh, good Lord. And how about throwing some flexibility, a little fitness in the winter so guys could turn a little better?
For sure. Yeah, of course.
And you've got an awesome idea. Okay, Stricker's putting.
Yes.
What about his putting?
Apart from the fact that it's awesome, I mean, it's unbelievably simple, consistent. I mean, you'd be able to speak to it more than I would. You've played with the guy. I've only met him once, but so fun to watch how simple his putting stroke is. I think it's something we can take away from this. So a little movement.
So I would say a couple of things. But really, it's the arcing up of the. It's the arcing.
That's the most
up,
unique thing for him. Yeah, for sure.
And that locks the wrist into place. Right. How many beginners do you putt with? So when I teach putting, everyone, I talk about the club shaft should follow up the middle of your forearm. So if you drew a line from the putter head from a side view, from the putter head, it should go right up your forearm. You want to get the putter in the palms a little bit. And then the putter should go right up. The putter grip should look like if it extended up, it'd go right up the middle of your arm.
For a visual for everybody, it's kind of a non-actually anchoring version of what Kuchar does, where he anchors the putter into his lead arm.
Correct. So that is the way it'll swing the best, right? Your hinge is at your elbow.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you just swing, that'll make the most amount of sense for balance and how the face rotates and works. And by arcing his wrists up a little bit, Steve ensures that happens. And he also locks it into place.
Yeah, so...
who else does that? Jim Kroll. My buddy Jim Kroll, who played at Purdue.
That you say it, you're right.
At Purdue with your Uncle Speck. He's a great putter.
He is a great putter.
And he does the same thing. He sets that wrist up there, and it's almost, you don't want to say locked in position because there's a little bit of wrist feel in a putting stroke, but it's not going to move around much.
No, just to visually again say that so everyone understands what we're talking about. So if you think about holding your hand in front of you, if you hinge it up like you want to give a thumbs up sign, that would be hinging up on the golf ball. What we're talking about is the other way, hinging down a little bit so that the line of your thumb is in a pure line extended with your forearm.
Yeah.
And that hinging down of the golf club, again, it not locks the arm, but it keeps the arm at one consistent angle.
But you don't want that. We see so many beginners with the high hands doing that at the start, and we say, no. The end of the club shouldn't aim at your belly button or up for a club because you want to use your wrists.
Yeah, in a full
Get
swing.
the hands down a little bit. So with a full swing, if you're looking from the side, we want the golf shaft to be aiming at your belt line, a couple inches below your belly button.
So then what happens for most people when they...
Hey, my pants weren't too high in those tips we did last week. You said they were too high.
Yeah, but you pulled them down after I said they were too high.
Yeah.
So they were too high.
I was talking about your belt line, 2 inches below your belly button. Sometimes mine's 1 inch only. I get the David Ledbetter pants going. Anyway,
yes,
okay, hang on. Apparently that's a good thing about a podcast. We can just...
Well, back to center.
Back to it.
The notably one thing that people talk about is that how Stricker always had, instead of having the toe a little off the ground, which a lot of people tend to do when they putt, he had the heel ever so slightly off the ground, right? Which was a direct visual representation of what we're talking about, right? You extend
Arcing
the wrist a little bit, or abduct the wrist down.
Yep.
And what that does is it keeps the thing straight. And in his case, because of his line angle on his putter, had the heel up. But you can't believe how many of you, and have someone take a picture of you and you'll see this, really keep your hands low to you when you putt, and then all of a sudden the toe of your putter is significantly up, which changes the lie angle
shots.
By a lot.
It actually makes the ball go to the left for a right-handed player.
It does.
Steve has always been blessed, and I think great putters are blessed with this. And we talked earlier, he'd have won a regular major or two. I think if he was a little more emotionally tough, a little more competitive. He's too nice a guy almost. Another one of those emotional competencies is competitiveness.
Yeah. I also think, though, that, the weeks just need to line up. Steve just never had the week.
But he was blessed with great rhythm. So we said one of the things that he didn't have is the distance. But someone who's got great rhythm has other blessings, right? Golf is like that. I mean, Tiger Woods struggles with hitting fairways because he's got that impact, that squish the ball power and testosterone. Steve has incredible rhythm and patience in transition, and you see it in his pitching, and you see it in his putting, and you see it in his driver swing. You know, he just can't really rip at it.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I would argue that for 9 out of 10 people listening, they're better to try to do what Steve Stricker does than to try to do what Tiger Woods does and hit it hard. Because
yeah, I would absolutely agree with that.
When you try to hit it hard from the top, when you try to hit it hard from the top, you break down your sequencing, and you know, being slow in transition is one of the most important things in golf. And I would recommend to everyone to take swings and swing up and almost feel like you stop a little bit, like a roller coaster getting to the top of a hill. Right before it drops down the other side, there's this suspended animation a little bit as the cars go over the top. And you want the change in direction to feel more like that, not this hurried, aggressive move down through the ball. And Steve, I've never seen him look like he made a rush swing in his life. So
no, I believe it. I mean, it's so rhythmic. It's a joke when you watch it. So I totally believe. I mean, the other point to make on that topic is that the hardest hitting players in the world also want to feel that way. I mean, Rory has talked about it on several occasions that he tries to keep his rhythm the most consistent, and he works on it the most. I mean, in the Golf Digest article, what was in 2015, he said that when he transition feels slow, he slows it down again. And then you see at the Players' Championship this year, he's leading after Saturday, and he goes to the range because he feels himself getting quick. So he goes to work on his rhythm a little bit. And I think, I think there are two types of golfers in this world. There are swingers and there are hitters. People who naturally have good rhythm and swing the club around them, and sometimes have a problem producing a little bit of distance with that, but are hard. It's hard to lose golf balls when you swing like that. And there are more hitters like Tiger who are more aggressive. I don't say I've always fallen into that ball camp where I'm a little more of a hitter of the golf ball. And you do get some distance out of that potentially, but if you can't learn to put a saddle on the bucking bronco of that rhythm and have a little bit of flow to your golf swing, you're going to lose a lot of golf balls.
Yeah, and
most people need more of it.
Right? Well, and also most people are in the right position at the top, so when they get aggressive, it just compounds the issue. So like you said, the takeaway is so important. If you can get yourself in a great top of backswing position and you rush a little bit, you might hit a pull or something, you'll be okay. But most people are, it's like a series of dominoes. They're in bad positions and then more bad positions, and they stop knocking over dominoes, and then it's like the downswing is like taking your arm and just smashing all the dominoes off the table. Yep. They just destroy everything.
Then you add speed and it gets even worse.
Okay, speaking of great transition and Tiger Woods and Steve Stricker, the combination of great power and Tiger Woods coil and Steve Stricker rhythm is Sung Hyun Park, who became #1 in the world after her win yesterday. And I'm in love with her golf swing.
By the way, can I just note, I'm going to note what time we're at, because that was the best transition that we've had, or the best segue that we've had so far. Good. So I'm going to make a note of it.
Love it.
That was
Love
good.
It. So, but I believe it. I mean, if you're watching the podcast, we've got Sung Hyun Park on the screen and behind us. And Jake, look at her in Dubai there on the right-hand side. She looks like Tiger Woods in 1997. Into that right leg flexed, incredibly level waist. Look at her white belt. You and I should be using this every lesson that we teach, because we're really into turning deep into that trailing leg, but keeping it flexed, right? Maintaining the flex in that right knee. And her shoulder turn and her hands are nice and high, so she'll have room to swing the club down.
There's a reason why she's Korean Tiger, right? That was her nickname coming up on the Korean tours. She was the Korean Tiger.
Here's the deal. She's Korean Tiger with Ernie Els rhythm.
It's quite the combination.
It's magnificent, right? And we see so many great things in her golf swing. I like what we see there. In her hands are very high above her head, full extension of the golf swing, but no lift in the body. Most people who try to get their hands higher up to create a bigger swing, they lift out of posture.
Absolutely.
And they stand up and they lose all of their coil. Average players, and they turn golf into too much of an up and down game, and that's what makes them slicers, because they They in trying to get their hands a little bit higher, maybe their body lifts out of posture instead of coiling. She's that awesome combination of a full loaded coil with really high hands at the top of the backswing, and it puts her in a position to just be a wrecking ball when it comes to smashing a golf ball.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think of, Tiger obviously early in his career was fantastic at this. Justin Thomas is a modern example of someone who does the same thing, who turns in posture immaculately well, but hands really swing vertically, and it's difficult to do. I mean, I think the hardest part about...
Got to be really flexible and really strong.
You absolutely do, and I think one of the hardest parts about learning golf is that it's the coordination of both of those moves, right? It's a turn in posture and a swinging up of the arms, and it's really difficult for people either not go too much around with both, have their body turn well but their arms go with it, or swing their arms up well but have their body lift as a result.
Yeah, golf's the only sport where the things go to, your arms swing up while your body turns.
Two totally
level.
Different moves.
Where in baseball, the arms swing and the body turns or coils, but they're going in the same direction. Chopping down a tree, swinging an axe, throwing a frisbee. In all of those things, the body coils athletically. Throwing a football, but the arms work with the body.
Yes.
In golf, the arms go in a different direction. The arms swing up while the body's swinging around. And we get both on our lesson tee. By the way, everyone, you got to be careful the other way, too. So if you've got a great body coil, but you're pulling your arms in around behind you and maybe gluing your back elbow to your rib cage, that's not a good position either. So in golf, you don't want to swing the arms up and allow the body to go with it, but you also don't want to turn the body or coil or load the body and get the arms in behind you.
Yeah, totally. I think the separation of those two moves and the coordination of that is why people need golf lessons, right? It's learning how to build those positions.
It's a learned skill.
Absolutely, it's a learned skill. And when you look at someone like Park, who does it so well, you can see right away how she must have great amounts of power, because her nice high hands position allows her to have a lot of radius and speed on the way down, and that epically good coil, that wind, adds a potent mix of rotational speed to that golf swing, and the two together are what make her hit the ball so hard at her size.
Yeah, the other thing I would say, Jake, is if you get your arms in behind you, if you're part of that glue my elbow to my ribs camp, because you've watched some Hogan in the past, and you think that keeping the club on the inside on the way back will prevent a slice. It actually, in on the backswing means out on the downswing.
Usually,
you can't really be in to in.
And if you're into in, I mean, the
you're
thing,
hitting big blocks and hooks.
It'll be tough because
unless you can rotate your body like a mother.
Well, that's what
Hogan did. Yeah.
That's what I was about to get to too. Which is if you're in and you keep it in, but you turn through like Hogan or DJ or a few of these guys, sure you can make it work. But as a general statement, I mean,
DJ's got high hands though. He doesn't have it glued to his side.
Oh, I completely agree with that. DJ
Matt Kuchar would be an example of someone who can do it. He keeps the arms very connected to his shoulder plane, and then really turns through the ball. Hogan was the only one who did it with power. And if you look at the positions he's in, I've studied tape of Ben Hogan over the years, and I mean that guy could move that body.
Would you say Ricky Fowler would be the closest in terms of the plane of Hogan and the ability to hit it hard?
Yeah, Ricky's really comfortable and flexible with his arms in behind him a little bit, yes, and then he really rotates through. That's a good one. I like that. And you could argue Sergio, the downswing move, Brooke Henderson, the downswing move, but the rotation, incredible rotation on Brooke as well. Sergio, very rotational. That's the only time those elbows can get behind you and still square the club. But let's not get too caught up in that, because the odds of one of our listeners being anywhere athletically near any of these, we're talking about Sergio and Hogan here.
Agreed. And let's make another point to the Brooke point. Brooke's outside on the way back, right? So we were talking about this before. As much as making sure having the club be a little inside, especially with the driver, can be advantageous to most of us, because most average golfers go across the golf ball.
The best way to do that is to be wide on the way back.
If anything, a little outside on the way back, and as a result, you wind up being able to drop the club a little more.
Yeah, Jim Furyk is the example of that, an exaggerated example of that.
Of course, the even more exaggerated example that I'm sure people are going to be seeing a lot of recently or soon is that Matt Wolff kid, right? Matthew Wolff really keeps the club outside and holds his wrist off. He actually doesn't have a typical hinge on the way up, which is why the club looks so freakily outside. And then as he resets his wrist at the top, it drops the club into position, and that dropping of the club puts it back in the slot. I'm not saying that's the right way to do it. I would truly implore most people to not take that as an example of do whatever I want, and as long as I'm good at impact, I'll hit it. I think there is a easier way to get to that position, to the proper position, than that. But if it works for you, if anything, a little outside is better than a little inside on the way back.
With the arms. But the problem that everyone has, the high handicappers, is as they swing the arms maybe out and up a little bit,
their bodies go with it.
There goes the sway. There goes the lift.
Yeah, totally agree.
So we've got to teach people using video to understand that your body coils and flexes. It stays in posture. We've referenced this before on the podcast, but the right knee of the typical average tour swing flexes an extra 6%, 6 degrees at the top.
Yes.
So it's 22 at the start and it's 27 at the top as they're kind of getting ready to use the ground to drive forward. They're staying in posture. They actually look smaller in their backswings, a lot of golf pros. Where we live down in the trenches here with the ball whackers and the 100 shooters, and they all lift. Everybody lifts trying to get bigger to hit the ball farther. And you need to understand that turning in posture, staying connected to the ground is so important. But the arms, you need to allow the arms to swing away from you and up. And Sung Hyun Park does it almost better than anybody. The other thing I would say, Jake, which is so cool about these photos you've put up, these video captures you've put up, is her head. I've seen her in a couple of swings move to the right a bit, which really reminds me of Tiger in 1997, where there's so much load into the right hip and leg and thigh that the head actually moves a couple inches.
Yeah, I think
back to Curtis Strange. You can't think back to him because you weren't alive, but really moved off the golf ball into the right leg.
I think Park is an example of someone who puts a little bit more pressure into her front foot at the start, so that she feels like she can push off of it a little bit and create that torque.
Like that.
Which, can be a good way to create a little extra wind. If you have, about 5% extra bit of pressure on your front foot at the start of your driver swing, you use that almost as a momentum, but you don't want to lean onto the foot, and there's a subtle nuance difference.
It's almost like in a sense, a forward press, but instead of the hands, the whole body's kind of shaping forward and then back. Right?
Yeah, so there's a little bit of pressure there, and then you kind of almost push off of it to wind and get behind the ball. And if you do that, you're right. Sometimes she's going to have, a 2 to 4 inch, maybe sway off the golf ball with her upper body, but it's not significant, and it does help her wind.
However, we talk about, one of the fallacies in golf, so gluing the elbow to the side is one. Another one is keeping the head down, which
I hate.
Is awful.
Yeah.
It prevents completing your golf swing. It prevents rotation. It prevents everything. But I don't even like keeping your head still. What I like is keep your head in place. So
centered.
Yeah, centered. You've got circles around her head from two angles, from the face-on view and the side view. Face-on and down the line, we call it. And, I tell my students, pretend you're in a space helmet. And that space helmet is awesome. You can live in there forever, except if you hit the edges of one of the space helmet, your head explodes. So you don't want to move your head around, but it can rotate in there, no problem.
Yeah, famously, Jack Nicklaus rotated quite a bit into his backswing.
He preset it, right? He preset it. I think your head, when I'm teaching a perfect wind-up in golf, 90-degree shoulder turn, 45-degree hip turn, and then a 22.5-degree rotation of the knees and the head. So if you think about percentages, right, the head rotates half of the hips,
yeah,
which is half as much as the shoulders. But it's hard to turn your shoulders. The thing I don't like about keep your head down is it's hard to turn your shoulders 9 degrees and move into your right leg.
There's lots of things I don't like keep
into your trail leg. Down. If your head stays still, if it stays down, it'll ruin your posture and everything else. So keep your head up, everybody. You've got to don't lift your chin up in the air, but when we all just stand, our head is an extension of our spine, kind of straight up.
Keep it up
just
naturally.
Kick your hips back and keep your head natural. And then in the backswing, let it rotate a little bit.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, if they let that happen a little bit, especially when they're not flexible, it would help. I think people are worried about taking your eye off the ball, and I say that with air quotes.
Yeah.
We're not saying look away from the golf ball per se, but I will also comment on the fact that I've never watched myself hit it because that happens too quickly.
Well, first of all, you're looking at the golf ball with your left eye if you're a right-hander at the top of your swing.
Yeah.
right?
Agreed. So, and for me, especially as someone who has a dominant right eye, my left eye needs glasses. I'm not even sure I do see the golf ball in my backswing. I haven't thought about it enough to have a concrete opinion on that one.
You would,
but the point I would make is this: that looking at the golf ball has nothing to do with whether you're hitting it or not. This whole idea of you miss, so you must have looked away from the golf ball, or if you stare at the ball harder, you'll hit it better, is nonsense. Because your swing is what's making it go. I mean, the example I saw you give to somebody years ago that I love and I adopted was if you're putting a nail into a wall with a hammer, if you miss the nail with the hammer, you don't stare at the nail harder, you change the way you swing the hammer.
Yeah.
So, if you are focused on your head being locked down and your eyes staring a hole into that thing, you're not going to necessarily hit the ball better. You're going to trap yourself and either have, a very unproductive small golf swing or even more movement because you got to get out of your own darn way because your head's locked down. So just allowing yourself to turn freely while the head, like you said, stays in place or stays centered or in that space helmet.
Why do you think it is that everybody focuses on the head? Like you lifted your head. Keep your head down.
I think because it's visually obvious. I think because you're watching somebody and you see all these things happen.
Yeah, but everything lifts. That's the point, right? If you top a shot, it's because you're coming out of posture. You're lifting up.
Yep.
Why do people just look at the head? I guess they're looking at the head because when you're talking to a human being, you're used to looking at their face and their head. So when you're watching someone and you see that head kick back coming up and you're like, oh, your head moved. But everything came up. I mean, as long as you turn in posture, you're right. You can hit a ball blindfolded.
I hit balls without looking at them for people to prove the point that we're talking about here all the time. I set up, I look up, I hit the ball, hit it fine.
I would say too, Jake, that if I had a choice, and this is juniors, right? The juniors get the legs going and the head stays back and they end up underplaying and they end up...
Absolutely.
They can't finish their golf swings. And I think if you said to me, Kevin, you've got this choice to make. You can either have every golfer you work with release the head a little quickly and rotate, or they can keep it down a little too much. I think I would say get it out of there.
100% of the time.
Yeah.
100% of the time.
We know Annika Sorenstam and David Duval, the really super obvious ones that aren't, what's her name too on the LPGA Tour, the very slow... Inbee Park, yeah. Same thing. The head is gone. Yeah. I mean, you're not even close to looking at
But I'd even argue DJ on his wedges does a lot of that. Henrik Stenson does that. Tiger's doing more of that now that his spine is fused. I think there are a lot of examples of people who clear out of the shot a little quicker.
Yeah, I've used this one. I think it's Henrik Stenson. I have to find it in my phone because I was using it for a while. Then I stopped, but he's hitting a little pitch shot. And I just filmed it off TV. It's pretty lame, but I noticed it so much on television, this one particular pitch shot from this angle that I rewound the DVR and I taped it. And I put it on my phone. And for a while, that's a few years ago, I was using it a lot teaching, and I've kind of stopped, but I'm going to go back and find it. But yeah, it's a really neat one too. Charlie Hoffman's another guy who does that. He releases out of the shot beautifully. Another great ball striker. Amazing stuff.
Anyway, to bring it back to Park, right? Because I wouldn't say she's a releaser of the head necessarily, right?
No, I don't think she is, but she keeps her head in a beautiful position.
She allows it to turn a little bit to create that incredible wind in her backswing. She keeps her arms up and in front of her chest without locking them down into her position. And these things in tandem with then a good downswing sequence, a powerful downswing sequence, are why she hits the ball as strong as she does at her size. And I think is a big part of why she's been such a force on the LPGA Tour. Is this the second or third time she's been number one in the world? Regardless, multiple number one in the world. I think, we'll be bouncing around that for years and years and years to come.
Don't forget, too, a lot of these Asian players, Korean players, they're adjusting to American society and language and everything. So being number one at her age and in a foreign... Imagine going to... wherever,
Well, imagine if we had to go primarily play and live in Korea and play. It wouldn't be
just an extra
thing.
challenge, right? We talked early in the show today about, is this a show? Early in the podcast today, we talked about, how the off-course stuff is so important to getting yourself centered and focused and positive. And boy, being in another culture throws a little wrench into all that, right? Even the... identification of the fans. You can imagine Sung Hyun going from tournament to tournament, and average players coming out to watch, or average people, coming out to watch. A lot wouldn't even know a lot of the players, right? And so it's not like Tiger Mania everywhere she goes. It'd be a really interesting thing. But when she goes back to Korea, I bet it's like Tiger Mania.
Yeah, with her, she's a major star in Korea. That would all even be an adjustment.
Yeah.
Getting used to going from being a major star. And I think now she's well known enough that people who are going to LPGA Tour events know who she is and follow her. But, at the start, it would be a very different vibe here than it would have been there. And I think, that's another thing to give credit to a lot of these Korean LPGA Tour players in general, of how good they are with the media and everything, and trying to speak English, most of them, and adjusting to the fact that they're in a different country is very difficult for them, I'm sure. And the fact that they're so good at it is another testament to, their resilience and their character, and how much work they put into taking their golf seriously. And I think it's something we can all, as a general statement, learn from, rolling with the punches a little bit.
Yeah.
And adapting to your situation.
Hell of a golf swing. Yeah, adapting to your situation, another skill set you need, another emotional skill set. I want to finish with Steve Stricker. And Sung Hyun Park has the rhythm. I don't know enough about Nate Lashley's swing to really comment on that, but they both have that patience and rhythm. Steve, we gave the tip of kind of setting that lead wrist angle and keeping it really calm, and to really swing the putter and, not have a quick transition, which he doesn't have in his golf swing. And it's been a downside maybe for distance, but it's been an upside for his putting, right? He's always got beautiful, beautiful rhythm. I can't tell you, last tip of the day here, how many people want a lesson and teach me how to read greens? They think they're missing putts.
All the time.
I can't read greens. First of all, you can't teach someone how to read a green because it's a feel thing based on years of experience. You can take a wider view at the green and figure out what the higher side and the lower side, but you've got to practice a lot to know whether it's 2.5 or 3 inches on a certain putt on a certain day.
Yeah.
Having said that, Jake, this is my really important green reading tip for everybody. Distance control and rhythm,
much more important,
is everything. If you can dead weight your putts, first of all, the hole is the biggest when the ball is going the slowest. So, in other words, a ball will fall in the side edges if it's barely moving. If it's moving, even going a foot past, it'll miss. I still like teaching about a foot past because odds are you'd like people to have a chance to make it instead of being 4 inches short every putt they make, right? So you'd like to teach a little more rhythm. But if you can be rhythmic with your putts, it's a 2-to-1 pace, like better golf. The backswing takes twice as long as the downswing because of gravity. If you can always have the same rhythm, and if you can dead weight your putts, you're going to be a much better putter. And in Canada here, for Canada Day, let's celebrate one of our most awesome things, and the rest of the world thinks it's a lame thing, but curling. Curling is first of all, it's a super fun sport to watch because the guys are mic'd and you can hear the strategy. But second of all, controlling the delivery speed is everything, right? And they have sweepers to help them with that, to dead weight and to get the right distance control. But distance control in putting is by far the biggest thing, and that's based on rhythm. And that 2-to-1 rhythm, by the way, everyone, you have to maintain it on all putts. So if you have a 5-footer, you need a 2-to-1 rhythm. If you have a 40-footer, you need a 2-to-1 rhythm. Most golfers I work with swing much faster on longer putts, and that faster swing puts hit into it, and that's why they're inconsistent. And most people 3-putt because they hit it 3 feet by or leave it 5 feet short, not because they misread it side to side by 3 feet.
Oh, pace is
it's
absolutely
a terrible read if
Yeah.
you miss by a foot. So if you do need side to side help, just back off and take a bigger view of the green and try to visualize, well, is that fringe higher than this fringe? And you'll get a general sense of side-to-side read. Also remember that a ball breaks most when it's losing momentum, when gravity's grabbing it. So what is happening around the hole is really important. Not if you're on a 40-footer, it doesn't matter what's happening to you 10 feet away. The ball's accelerating and maintaining momentum. As it's slowing down, it's going to take the break. So always pay attention to the break around the hole. But distance control and rhythm, like Steve Stricker, is everything.
Well, to your point, I mean, think about this for a second. How many times, if you're honest with yourself as a golfer, have you cursed yourself out for hitting it 10 feet by or leaving it halfway? Oh, I left it. I only got it halfway there. You hit a bad putt. How many times you've cursed yourself out for misreading the putt by 12 feet? That never happens. You never miss it by 12 feet. I mean, there might be one situation.
Said, a 2-foot misread is a massive one, and if you dead weight the putt, you make every 2-footer.
Yeah. I mean, to that point, just to throw a few stats out there for people, I mean, the last ranked player on the PGA Tour this year, Ryan Armour, as of last week, I don't know if the stats changed this week, but as of last week was Ryan Armour, 98% from 3 feet and in. So
he's last, and he's at 98.
He's at 98. So I think there's about 19 players at 100% this year so far, that have
is amazing.
That kind of percentages from close.
3 feet is not small.
No,
like that's not a gimme. That's outside the leather. 3 feet, yes. 36 inches. Your putters are 35 inches.
Totally.
That's the length of the putter.
And we're not saying...
And they're making... The last guy on tour is at 98%.
So we're not saying that, everybody should have that percentage. I mean, if you don't work on your putting and try to get closer, but you aren't going to make... you're not going to miss 50% of those.
Putts,
yeah,
if you can dead weight your putts, you're not going to miss by more than 3 feet.
No. And then the other point to that, talking about it being 3-putt avoidance, the number one player on the tour this year is only 3 putts 1.49% of the time. The last place player, I think it's funny, is Bubba Watson. And he's 3-putting 4.86% of the time. That's the worst player on tour, right? So you think about most
The guy who seems to play most by the seat of his pants with creativity and isn't structured
is the guy who has the
most 3-putts.
Most 3-putts, but also to the point of that taking it to our level now, like for most people, if 3-putt avoidance is the biggest thing we're making a point of, you say, well, how little should I be 3-putting? Well, how about less than 5% of the time? And if you look at Bubba, I know that we're saying it's a high number compared to the other guy. Out of 864 holes, he's only 3-putted 42 times. Most people might 3-putt 42 times in 100 holes.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things
that's a bit high, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Sure, maybe it is a little high, not giving people
that's
credit,
beginners, though. We see a lot of beginners and newer players, yeah.
So as a general statement,
rhythm.
And I couldn't agree with you more on the putting side, and we talked about in the swing. I mean, rhythm is so important everywhere. It's a joke.
Hey, my final thing to leave people with, because people, I think, don't work on their putting enough. Steve's a natural, or I spent many an afternoon putting with Steve and watching him, and things are natural. We have tendencies. Tiger, like I said, has more of a rip-it tendency. Steve has more of a rhythm tendency. But you've got to have a certain type of emotional stamina and mental toughness to stand over those putts. At 52, the nerves he's got. And you got to practice a lot. And Steve has worked very hard in his putting. Show me a natural, and I'll show you a guy who works really hard at something.
Of course.
Because it looks natural, right? Yeah. But people tend to think they can't read putts. Teach me how to read a putt. So we've just explained that distance control is more important than directional. Stop spending so much time on direction. Start spending more time on distance control and rhythm. Number one. The other thing is, you're not as good as you think you are. When you hear 98% is the worst guy on tour with 3 putts, or I'm sorry, that was with the 3-footers. Yeah. 98% is the lowest guy on tour. I was looking at the numbers. Justin Rode is leading in total putts at 27 per round, 27 point something. He's number 1 on tour right now. We saw him at Pebble Beach doing some crazy things. But these guys are all so good. So the only guy I could find the lowest total this year. Now listen to these numbers. I always say to amateurs, how many putts do you have around? Oh, I'm pretty good. I'm 32 or I'm 34 or, almost 2 every hole, I mean, whatever it is. So Graham McDowell had a 20-putt round, which you play 18 holes.
That's unbelievable.
If people aren't paying close attention when they're listening, he had 20 putts. In the top 60 guys on the putting stat, total putts this year, 10 of them have had 21 putts, 10 different guys.
That's wild.
That's only 3 putts over 1.
Yeah.
Think about that. 10 of 60. That's, just under 20% of them have had a 21-putt day. The 22s and 3s. Every guy on tour almost has a 23-putt round on their stat sheet.
Which is my best period.
I don't think I've ever done 23. I can remember some 25s and 6s where I missed a bunch of greens and made some putts, but these guys are so good at putting. They practice so hard. They've got incredible rhythm. They work so hard at the mechanics of it. and you've got to spend more time. Buy an expensive putter. Get fit for a putter. You use it every single hole. Practice more often, and your scores will plummet. I mean, think about those numbers, Jake.
I mean, for perspective of that for everybody, I mean, as an example, I had that round when I was 16, the 23 putt round. I remember because it was magical, and the reason I remember it being so magical was because I was shooting, 2 handicap at the time, maybe a 3. And I went out in the junior inter-club qualifiers, 16-year-old, and shot 67 because I had 23 putts. I mean, I'd never broken 70.
Okay, Jake, I'm listening. Congratulations on that round.
Well, no, but I'm not expecting
I'm just looking at the stats,
but...
so hang on. I'm still going. I'm at T86, and there's not one guy who hasn't had it. There's a 25. So Alex Chayka is 97th on putting on the PGA Tour. By the way, everyone, he's 28.98. He's less than 29 putts around. And he's the first guy where 25 is his lowest. The 97 guys in front of him have all had a 23, a 22, a 21, or a 24, or a 20 in Graham McDowell's case. And it just should, you got to let that sink in, everybody.
Well, the point is that's why these guys are so good. I mean, there's a lot of other things going on too, but me as a 3 handicap, you have that low putts, you shoot that number. I mean, obviously I must have hit the ball pretty well, but the putting is a real differentiator. If you wonder why these guys make so many birdies, it's not because they're hitting to the 2 feet from the hole every time. It's because they're making bloody putts.
Yeah, the last guy on the list here, Jason Duffner at 200th, he's got a 25 putt round, and his average is 30.18, which is pretty bad in relative terms. But he's only 3 shots below Justin Rose is in first,
which shows you how good all of these guys are at putting, right? So if we recap our whole discussion today, first of all, put things in perspective. The 3-foot putt, you should be making that most of the time, but if you don't, no big deal, right? Put your golf game in general in perspective. Be a little more resilient and focused on the golf course, then it'll totally change your game. Work on your putting like crazy. We learned a few things from Steve, but work on your putting like crazy to get your putting down. And the best way to do that is work on your rhythm and dead weighting the ball to the hole so that you don't have to worry about 3 putting. You up your 3-putt avoidance, and even if you're not that great at reading greens, you'll never, have 40 putts again. And then the last bit is you take that into your golf swing, that rhythm into your golf swing, and if you can do that and plus creating a few positions, we use Park as the example, then...
Keep your head in position. Don't keep it down.
While swinging in rhythm, and all of a sudden your athleticism will go up and everything comes back. So a little bit of resilience, a little bit of rhythm in your golf game, and most people, I think, would be exponentially better. And then from there, it's about building positions.
If you're competing, you got to stay in the present. You got to keep your hand in place and keep your brain in the present. Those are pretty good tips. All right, watch the Irish Open, everybody. Have a great golf week. We'll talk to you again. Good job today, Jake. I hope we helped. I hope we helped people play a little bit better golf.
For sure, and happy Canada Day, everybody, again.